The first step of the CNC block assembly process is to pick up all the parts that you're going to need. This can be found in part 1 of the assembly manual. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about safety rules. The first rule is we should always wear safety glasses when making and using our CNC axis. Second rule is we should really secure parts in a vise when tapping and reaming so that we don't slip and cut ourselves. The third rule is don't touch the blades or the sharp end of bits. This is obvious, right? You don't want to cut yourself. And then the fourth rule is if you're going to use any high-speed rotary tools, make sure to use an enclosure. So let's get started. What we're going to do next is we're going to ream some holes. To do this, we're going to use a reaming bit. We're going to carefully take it out of its container, making sure not to touch the blades on the reaming bit itself. Those blades are relatively sharp. We're going to take that bit and we're going to put it into our handheld reaming tool, so our reaming wrench. We're going to tighten down the two handles of that tool to make sure that the bit is securely fastened so it doesn't slip and fall out. So we can check that a couple of times. Next, we're going to take a block and we're going to figure out which holes we're going to ream. There's 4 possible holes that we could ream, as shown here. We want to make sure we ream the holes that are spaced apart by the shafts so that the shafts can sit in those holes, and this can make an end axis for our single axis CNC machine. So we're going to take the reamer and we're going to actually push down from the inside face onto the hole as we ream. So we're going to start reaming the hole in a downward motion, twisting and pushing slightly on the block itself. As we do this, we should find that the plastic starts to chip off of the hole. Now that we're done our first hole, we want to make sure that the second hole is in the correct location. We want to make sure that the holes that we ream are spaced apart by the same distance that the shafts will be when their sliding axis is installed. To do this, we make sure that the holes are on the channel axes. Now that we're done one block, it's pretty easy to figure out which holes should be reamed in the next block. So we put the 2 blocks together and just align the reamed holes and select those as the next ones to be reamed. We have to ream 2 holes in a total of 4 blocks to make the end blocks for our axes. So keep reaming. The next step in our prep is to tap the motor shaft coupler. What we're going to do is we're going to take our motor shaft coupler and we're going to put it into the vise. The idea behind this is to securely fasten the motor shaft coupler before we start our tapping process. Once the shaft coupler is securely fastened in the vise, we're going to assemble our tapping wrench. So we're going to take our tapping bit carefully out of its container and insert it into the tapping wrench and tighten it down. With the tapping wrench assembled, we can now tap the hole in the shaft coupler. We're going to hold the tapping wrench so that the tap is in line or parallel with the hole in the shaft coupler, and we're going to slowly rotate the tap while applying some pressure downwards on the tapping wrench. Once we're done our tapping, we can take our threaded rod and screw it into our shaft coupler. Now it's time to actually attach some of our blocks together. To do this, we're going to use number 8 nuts, bolts, and washers. These fasteners are going to be put in the corners of the block to attach the two blocks together to form one modular block. The idea behind this is to take one of the bolts, put on a washer, insert the bolt into the hole, put another washer on, and then secure that fastener with a nut. And the process is repeated for all 4 corners of the block. You can use a screwdriver at any point in time to tighten down the nuts and bolts on the block. In this next step, what you're going to do is take the other 2 blocks in which you ream 2 holes, and you're going to install an anti-backlash nut on the threaded rod system. To do this, you're going to find the hole that the threaded rod slides into. In one of the blocks, you're going to take the threaded rod and insert it into that hole. Next, you're going to take the 2 square nuts. The first square nut, you're going to place the flat side of the nut facing the block, and you're going to put it onto the shaft. The second square nut, you're going to place the flat side facing the end of the shaft, not the block, and you're going to screw that on as well. Finally, at the end of this process, you're going to take the other block and you're going to face it towards the original block so that the 2 would come together with the insides facing, and you're going to slide it onto the threaded rod. The goal of this process is to have the 2 square nuts separated at such a distance that the blocks just touch each other. This is a relatively tough step and might require sliding the blocks on and off of the threaded rod a few times before you actually get the nuts placed in the correct positions. Good luck! Once you think you've got your anti-backlash nut correctly installed, what you're going to do is you're going to attach the 2 blocks together, once again using the corner holes and the nuts, bolts, and washers as you did before. Remember, put a washer onto the bolt first, put the bolt into the hole, put another washer, and apply a nut. Tighten. In order to assemble the axis frame, you're going to take the 3/8 inch diameter steel shafts and you're going to insert them into the holes that you reamed earlier. One little hint, you may want to back off the threaded rod a little bit so that the block can lie flush on the table as you insert the shafts. In this optional step, you're going to take the nylon bushings and you're going to put 2 bushings on each of the steel shafts to help the sliding block slide better. The next step is to install the other block on the other side of the axis as a support. We do this by inserting the shafts once again into the holes that we reamed. For now, we're going to take our motor and we're just going to put the shaft of the motor onto the shaft coupler. Later, we're going to have to make this a more secure connection between the motor and the shaft coupler. With the motor installed, we're going to install a block around the motor to become the sliding block. We take our block and we can orient it either way, But in my case, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have additional access for shafts on either side of the sliding block. So I'm going to take the channels that don't have holes in them and I'm going to line them with my shafts. I'm going to place the block underneath the shafts and then I'm going to slide the nylon bushings so that they fit into the insets on the block. Once we have the block and the channels aligned, we're going to take our other block and put it on top of that one so that we form a complete block. Once again, we're going to use our fasteners, our nuts, bolts, and washers to assemble a block and fasten it together. Once the block is together, we need to make sure that the motor doesn't move around inside the motor cutout. To do this, we take some zip ties and we securely fasten the motor by pulling it towards the front of the block. We take 2 zip ties and join them together so that they're long enough to go around the motor on the front of the block. We do this twice to make sure that both sides of the motor are nice and securely fastened to the block. The final thing we do is install a handle or a knob on the end of the threaded rod